If you can commit to 5 videos, I can teach you how to set up and care for a saltwater aquarium. In part 1, we set up the gear. In part 2, we get the aquarium wet and ready for pets. Part 3, we add fish and cleanup crew members. Part 4, we add corals and anemones. And part 5 is all about taking care of our animals long term. We'll be using our 15-gallon HelloReef kit, and we've put the link below. Before we jump in, I have one disclaimer. We're going to be covering a lot of ground in the next 5 videos. You're going to be introduced to a whole slew of new topics and concepts. We're not going to take a deep dive into any of them, but we're going to give you just enough information to get your tank set up and successful. If you end up purchasing the HelloReef kit, it comes with a 6-week course and over 50 how-to videos, which will go way more into depth. All right, let's get started with video 1, setting up the gear. First, let's get everything out of the box. There are 5 boxes inside of the display portion of the tank and a few more items in the smaller rear filtration chamber. To remove the tank, either lift it up and out or use the perforations on the side of the box. Don't worry what everything is for now, we'll explain it in due course. Let's get rid of all the plastic around the tank and then wipe it down. Once everything's inside the tank, including the sand, the rock, and the water, it's gonna weigh about 165 pounds, so it's really important we find a sturdy foundation for the tank. You could purchase a separate cabinet stand meant for fish tanks, but because this tank is small enough, a sturdy tabletop, desktop, cabinet, or counter will work just fine. Make sure to give the surface a quick wipe down as well as the bottom of the tank, which is covered in a black foam pad which protects the glass aquarium from cracking. Just be sure not to place your tank directly next to a window or someplace that gets a whole bunch of direct sunlight. Too much sun will cause nuisance algae growth, and you want to keep the water temperature as stable as possible, so if it's next to a drafty window, that might be a challenge. Now that our empty tank is set up where we want it, let's get the rear filtration chamber up and going. There are 3 total rear filtration chambers, and let's start with the one on the left. This is the first stop for our water and where we place our filter sock. Take the included white filter sock and thread it through the acrylic black holder. Now push the sock down into the first chamber until the holder rests snugly. Moving on to the second chamber, the large central rear filtration chamber, this is where our bag of ceramic media, sponge, and heater are gonna go. Take one of the large black sponges and push it all the way down to the bottom of the chamber. Now find the mesh baggie full of white ceramic biomedia and place it on top of the sponge on the left side of the central chamber. Now we're going to install the heater first, and most importantly, we're not going to plug it in until we add water to the tank. Also, the heater may need to be calibrated, but we'll do that later. For now, turn the dial and set the temperature between 77 and 78 degrees. Attach the suction cups to the holder, snap in the heater, and stick the heater to the rear glass panel on the right side of the central chamber, all the way to the bottom until the heater is gently touching the black sponge. As soon as we fill the tank with salt water, it's really important we come back and check the heater and make sure the water height is at least to the minimum water height level as marked on the heater. The worst and by far the most dangerous thing that can happen to a heater is it explodes because it was turned on while not properly submersed in water. Now let's get the return pump installed into the final rear right chamber, and this is super easy. Just find the C-shape micro pump and push the free end of the pre-cut black flexible tubing into the pump output. Slide the pump with attached tubing to the bottom of the right chamber and attach the flared nozzle. With the rear filtration chamber done for now, it's time to build a home for our pets using the purple rock, something we call an aquascape. For this, we'll need the cardboard template, rock, gloves, and tube of epoxy. Our goal here with an aquascape is twofold. First, it's creating a place to put our corals and a location for our anemones to sink their foot into and feel secure. And second, our aquascape, or just scape for short, is there to provide protection and a safe place for our fish to hide and feel protected. You can put the purple pieces of Carib Sea Life Rock together in multiple ways, but here's a couple things to consider while doing so. First, it needs to be stable. A tippy aquascape is just disaster in waiting. Next, it needs to not be too tall. We're going to be placing corals and anemones on top of the rock, and they will stretch out quite a bit, so we actually don't want our aquascape to be much higher than halfway up the tank. And lastly, we want to make sure there's a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch gap all the way around the aquascape, so there's enough space for flow as well as cleaning the glass with an algae scraper. I'm going to create a simple pyramid for this aquascape with 3 pieces of rock on the bottom, 2 on the next level, and a single piece on top. They should feel pretty secure already, but we're going to use some pieces of epoxy to make sure they really hold together well. Put on your nitrile gloves, grab a knife, and cut the epoxy into several pieces. I think I'll need about 5 in total for this aquascape. Grab a piece and remove the plastic wrapper, then knead it together for 30 to 45 seconds until it's a consistent color. It's gonna smell kind of bad, but that's normal. You only have a couple minutes to work with the epoxy, so do the next step quickly. Roll the epoxy into a tube and press it between the 2 pieces of rock. Epoxy is not sticky, so it won't really stick to your rock super well. Rather, once hardened, it's meant to create a solid, flexible, cement-like structure between the 2 rocks. Continue with new pieces of epoxy until you've secured all the pieces together. Epoxy takes 24 hours to fully cure, and I wouldn't attempt to move your aquascape for at least a few hours. When it's ready to move, you will need to support it from the bottom, because remember, the pieces aren't actually stuck together. While we wait for the epoxy to set, get the 10-pound bag of sand and empty it into the tank. Use your hand to spread it around, and if your bag came with a water clarifier pouch, set that to the side for later. After a few hours have passed, lower the aquascape into the tank, being sure not to scratch the glass while doing so. The sand is wet and full of beneficial bacteria, so to keep them alive, put some plastic wrap over the top until we're ready to add salt water. Only 4 more videos to go until you have set up your saltwater aquarium. Click here for video 2, the nitrogen cycle, and until next time, be well and happy reefing, everybody.